Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Bold Predictions here at Inside Nebraska. It's been a while since we did a video one of these. We had a written one version go up on our site for Minnesota, but first video action of the year for Bold Predictions. Steve, how we feeling, man? Are we feeling frisky? We feeling out on a limsy this season,
I'm
this
I'm
week?
not feeling confident in any of my predictions because I don't know how this game is going to go. I could see Nebraska winning, I could see Nebraska losing, I could see Colorado just playing really well like they did last week at TCU, the offense, not the defense. But yeah, I don't know about you guys. I'm not feeling confident at all about what I'm picking here.
Yeah, it's a weird one, man. Like it's kind of like what we kind of felt last week going into that Minnesota game, right? Where we're like, man, I just don't know how this is going to go. Like there's so much unknown. And then still again this week, we know more obviously about the teams because both teams have played a game, but we don't know what's real and what's not from each of the teams. And that old coaching adage that you get so much better between week 1 and week 2. I think that's going to be true for Nebraska. Certainly, if it is true for Colorado, everyone's in trouble. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm with Steve. Like I don't know if these are going to be the most like hardcore. I'm like super passionate about them predictions. Maybe one of them. Maybe one of them. We'll get there.
Well, yeah, I think week one of college football is like mystery week. Week two is overreaction week, and you see that with the lines moving. I mean, Colorado beat up TCU on offense and also allowed 42 points. And I was looking at the lines a little bit ago, and it jumped from Nebraska was a 7.5 point favorite in this game back in May, on May 8th,
So,
the first line I could find, and it pretty much stayed relatively similar to that until the official game week line came out.
right.
Then boom, Colorado is, depending on where you look, a 5 point favorite or 3 point favorite, what have you. And now, right now, the line is hovering around -2.5 to 3.5 for Colorado, with the over under total of 59.5 for the 11 a.m. kickoff. Big noon kickoff at 11
Big
a.m.
noon.
Central, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, which we can always have fun with that. But I don't know. I Last week we actually wound up being pretty on the money with like how we thought this game would go. Like this is how we can envision things going, and that's kind of how it went as far as just being sort of a unrhythmic, choppy game with some penalties, some turnovers. I didn't envision 4 turnovers for Nebraska, but I wouldn't have been shocked if you said 4 turnovers total between the teams, but
Right.
didn't envision Jeff Sims throwing 3 picks and then the Anthony Grant fumble. But for the most part, I thought it relatively went as far as, or it went how we sort of anticipated it. And this week, I'm confident how it could go. The two possibilities, like the two most realistic possibilities in my head, and I feel like it's either Nebraska gets their doors blown off, and we're looking at a game like Oklahoma last year, not Michigan, where it's sort of just a slow bleed out game, or Michigan, that's what they
Right.
do to you. And it was over by halftime, but it had a different feel than that Oklahoma game where that Nebraska kept it close for a few drives, and then boom, next thing you know, game's over at halftime. Chuba Purdy's coming in, rocking passes like toward the end of the third quarter. So I feel like it could be that sort of game, or the game script goes, if Nebraska plays this game the way I feel like they should try to play it, and you guys probably feel the same way, is grind it out, play that Big Ten West style of football, ground and pound. Don't try to do too much. Don't be putting the ball in the air 30 times and try to play the same game against Colorado that TCU did last week. Play the style of football that we heard this team was going to do all offseason, ground and pound, battering ram, Gabe Ervin Jr. And that leads into perfectly my first bold prediction, and that is Gabe Ervin Jr. runs for 120 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I was going to hedge a little bit and say just 1 touchdown, or him and Jeff Sims combined for 2 touchdowns, because those things down in the inside the 5, 10 yard line, inside the red zone, touchdowns can kind of be arbitrary sometimes. But why not go bold? We're here for the first time. Gabe Ervin Jr., 120 plus yards, 2 touchdowns. They'll feed him the rock. I would assume they'll feed him the rock in this game.
And I think a lot of fans want to see Gabe Ervin get that rock instead of Anthony Grant. So we will see if that comes true. But I will stay for my prediction. I will stay with the offensive side. I think my prediction, my first one is going to be Jeff Sims rushes for over 100 yards and he passes for over 150 yards. So it's going to be a busy day for Jeff. But I think he produces both on the ground and a little bit more through the air. I just think when I look at Nebraska and I rewatch the Minnesota game, the offense really struggled with the traditional handoff run game with the running backs overall. I feel like they didn't really do well. And that's why you saw Jeff Sims rush the ball as many times as he did, because, he's dynamic back there. And if you can't grind it out with the running backs in front of that offensive line, who kind of had a shaky performance at Minnesota, you introduce the quarterback run game, give him some reads, let Jeff cook basically on the ground. And he can absolutely do that at 6'4", 25 pounds. He's just a massive human being that can get the job done on the ground. But with 150 passing yards, I'm not totally psyched about that position prediction. But, with Marcus Washington coming back and playing 4 quarters instead of 2, because he was suspended for the first 2 at Minnesota, I just think that there's a real chemistry between Jeff and Marcus Washington. And I think that they're going to really kind of feed off each other well. And I think, maybe less throwing down the field and more short intermediate routes for Jeff. And I think Marcus could be a primary target for there in that short and intermediate passing game. So 100 yards on the ground for Jeff and 150 through the air for Jeff.
And it's interesting. I'm going to keep it. I like that one, actually. But I'm going to keep it on the offensive side of the football. And I'm going to go to the big boys up front. I'm always trying to find a way to work those offensive linemen in. I think it's, spoiler alert, the key to the entire Matt Rule rebuild is this offensive line and what they do with it, both in the present and in the future. I think that this is the game that kind of kickstarts that, but not in a, hey, they're going to go rush for 400 yards or anything like that. The most basic thing that they could do in this game, if they're going to eat up the clock and they're going to control the football, is Nebraska's offensive line will not commit a penalty in this game. Now, that is, I feel like, and I said this in the beginning, and I didn't think I was going that bold, but that's almost as bold as I'm ever going to get on here, because you just never see that from this group, this offensive line. You guys are shaking your head because you can picture right away the penalties inside the 5-yard line, false starts. There's always some sort of holding. There's always something, it feels like, with this offensive line, and an offense that, at least to right now, is not explosive enough to overcome those types of penalties. I feel like that's fair to say. And so I think that if Nebraska is going to play the style of game that we all think they should play, and that would lend itself to them winning the football game, make this a Big Ten West game. I was explaining this to someone earlier, that I think that if you could picture whatever you think that Minnesota or Iowa would do in this game going out to Boulder, that's what I want Nebraska to look like this weekend. If you're going to do that, it's going to have to require disciplined offensive line play. And so I think that Nebraska can do it. And that's going to be my first one. I think they go out there to Colorado in a tough, hostile environment, which is the big X factor here. That's the thing that's got me actually the most nervous about it, with this prediction and it actually coming true. But I got Nebraska's offensive line not committing a penalty.
Oh, Greg, next time we do these, we're not going to communicate about what our bold prediction is, or at least not both of them before, because if we hadn't talked about it a little before, I would have legitimately been like, that wouldn't have been a fake.
Would you have been shocked?
Wouldn't have been hemming it up just for the energy. I would have been like, whoa, all right. Yeah, that's what you think. I could see them committing a penalty on the very first drive, like they did
on the first play.
What was it?
I think it's likely.
Yeah, I think so. Great. Greg,
that's what makes it bold, guys. That's what makes it bold.
Yeah.
In the famed history of bold predictions video that we've been doing for years and years and years, that might be the most bold that anyone's done. I mean, boldly go where no man has gone before. Whoever said that, it was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin,
one of those guys.
Astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Lance Armstrong. Somebody said it, but I don't know. I don't. If Nebraska's offensive line does not commit a penalty in this game, and Gabe Ervin Jr. or Jeff Sims comes close to completing one of our bold predictions, then Nebraska's sitting in really good territory come the fourth quarter.
Which would that surprise anyone though, that if they were sitting in good territory to get to the fourth quarter? But I digress.
Well, we'll see, Greg. What a great tease for the wrap up of the show. You're a pro at this now. I mean, come on now. But shifting to defense, I don't think we meant to do all offense first, but that's where we're going. Now defense, where I mean, Nebraska has its work cut out for him. Tony White was on the radio Tuesday night, sort of breaking down the Colorado offense and Shedeur Sanders, and he was asked to describe the CU offense. They pretty succinctly said space. They like to play in space. They think their tempo is an equalizer for them. They're fast. They like to get the ball out fast and get their guys on the perimeter, those one-on-one matchups. So tackling is going to be paramount in this game, which always is. But when you're playing against the skill guys that Colorado has, and Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, Dylan Edwards, and the list goes on, they have 4 guys with 100 yards receiving each. So Edwards, Hunter, Jimmy Horn, and Xavier Weaver. And I don't know, the tackling, I think Omar Brown talked about it, but also with the bold prediction I'm going with is Travis Hunter related and Quentin Newsom related. And I hedge bets again on this one. I have Quentin Newsom intercepts a pass, and Travis Hunter also beats him for 2 30-plus yard receptions here down the field. I'm going down the field because I wanted to hit on the point that we talked about, Greg, on Rapid Recap on Tuesday, and Quentin Newsom talked about at the podium, is those the deep balls that Matt Rule said this Colorado offense is going to take at least 10 deep shots a game. And I mean, you got to think at least 2 or 3 of those are going to Travis Hunter. You got to think Quentin Newsom's going to get his share of time in coverage on him. So I'm anticipating a few opportunities for both of them for pass breakups, interceptions, big explosive plays, and I think Travis Hunter gets him on a couple of them, but I think Quentin's going to come down with an interception, and didn't have any pass breakups last week or interceptions. He had 6 total tackles, but he's going to get his first pick of the season in what might wind up being his toughest matchup of the entire season.
First pick of the season and his career. I think a lot of people have been waiting for Quentin to finally snag
I knew it was his career, but I didn't want to just say it then. Discredit Quentin's picks.
Yeah, I go back to, I think it was Evan Cooper's very first press conference at Nebraska as the DB's coach, and he was just asked about what he thought about his room, and he said, I got a couple NFL guys in there, and I think everybody kind of said, okay, well, Quentin Newsom's one of them. And for, when we're thinking about this game and Quentin Newsom and his career, he's a longtime starter. He's played a lot of snaps here as a Husker. Everybody's kind of viewing him as a potential NFL guy. Well, this is an incredible opportunity for Quentin Newsom to get some NFL tape against NFL guys for NFL scouts. So I'm really, I like that prediction. Zach, we'll see how Quentin holds up because he didn't get a ton of action at Minnesota, I don't think. So, at least I don't remember he did, but he's sure gonna get some opportunities now. I bet Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, they're not gonna care about which corner is viewed as Nebraska's best DB. They're gonna throw where they want to throw, and they don't care who. I feel like if
Deion Sanders was out there at cornerback, Deion Sanders, the coach, would still say, "We're throwing at him all day." Yeah. It's challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was an interesting and good prediction, Zach. But for my second prediction, I'm going special teams. So, if you rewatch Colorado's game with TCU, you saw the offense just click right away. Sean Lewis is an awesome OC. Shedeur Sanders is like the perfect quarterback for him. The defense, Colorado's defense struggled against the run. There's a lot of plays made against Colorado's defense. But then there are some just missteps with Colorado's special teams too. They're not up to par right now. So they missed a field goal. Jay Feely's son, Jace, former NFL kicker Jay Feely, his son is kicking for Colorado this year. I thought that was kind of interesting. His first field goal attempt was blocked, and then he ultimately kind of made up for it with a 49-yarder right before half. So that was cool. But he's also kicking off, and he kicked one out of bounds. And so that was a mistake. And then he kicked off another one, and TCU returned it like 82 yards. So I think there's an opportunities for Nebraska on special teams on Saturday. And I think Ramir Johnson, my bold prediction is Ramir Johnson will get it past the 50 and into Buffalo territory. So I think Ramir Johnson is going to get a kickoff return, and he showed he's capable of it. I think it was like a 63-yarder at Minnesota. I think he does something similar and puts Nebraska's offense into really good position in plus territory on Saturday.
Yeah, I like that one as well. I think that both of you guys are. I think the special teams one is now. It's really funny how this turns right after all of the attention for special teams being so bad at Nebraska, and then now it kind of feels like after that first game, it's at least stabilized. They definitely won the special teams battle in that game against Minnesota. The one thing that we talked about how this could have been a storyline in the end of that game last week, is Tristan Albano could have gotten an opportunity to kick a game-winning field goal in his first game. That would have been fascinating, but we didn't get to see that. So that's really, to me, the big question with their special teams is he has the leg and the talent to do it. Just seeing him be able to go make kind of a clutch field goal, it doesn't have to be a last second one, just one that they really need. But mine is not about special teams, but I am staying they count that as defense. So I'm staying on defense for this one. And I feel like this is if my bold predictions come true, then you kind of get an idea of what my prediction for the game is, because my bold prediction is Quentin Newsom related as well. And that is that Travis Hunter will have less than 100 receiving yards in this football game. So this also goes in direct kind of opposition of what Zach said. No, technically he could get 2 30-yard gains and then lock him down for the rest of the game. I am curious though, because they're probably not going to tell us whether or not they plan to have Quentin kind of follow him around and shadow him the whole game. That would also be, I mean, I hope he does. Like, I'm really looking forward to that matchup, if you couldn't tell based on how much we've talked about it on this pod, and I talked to both of you about it just on the side. I think that it's a huge opportunity for Quentin Newsom, who everyone kind of thinks is a pro. And when you look back at this season, this is one of the games you're going to pull to either support that argument or disprove that argument about him being an NFL draft pick, right? It's an enormous opportunity for him. I think that he's up for the challenge this week and holds the Travis Hunter, the two-way king, to under 100 yards receiving.
That's what I was going to say is, hey, I mean, if he goes for 2 catches for 65 combined yards a week, and Newsom gets a pick, we could both be right. I mean, why not?
Right.
Like, let's have some synergy around here. But if this game goes, want to wrap up with some final score predictions to sort of lightning round it, if you will. And talking about this a little bit before we got on air, we're going over what the updated lines are and the totals. It's like I said at the starts, around minus 2.5 to 3.5 for Colorado and 59.5 across the board. So originally I wanted to go 31-28 for my final score, but I am picking Nebraska to win because I can see how I think you guys can too. If they win this game, the formula for it is all there. It's all stuff we all broke down, and it's also going to be hinging upon ball security and not making those mistakes. And I mean, even if the offensive line has 1 or 2 penalties, if it's not inside the 5 or 10 yard line, you're sitting in good position. If you clean up the misuse of timeouts, which probably be a little more difficult in that environment in Boulder on Saturday. Luckily, it's not a night game for Nebraska because it would be backed up rather than the 10 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff, which I don't think is that big of a deal in the long run, but maybe a little less electric than it would be if it was under the lights. But I think that if Nebraska holds true to what we talked about, that run game, which you can run on this Colorado defense, TCU ran for 262 yards and I think almost $7 or 7 yards a pop. I can't remember the exact stat. I had it written down somewhere in here. 262 yards on 37 carries, so 7.1 yards per carry. So if Nebraska is doing that, they're not going to be matching the same pace that TCU was running with. It's going to be a lot more slow it down pace, and that's what I'm banking on. I actually think Jeff Sims probably will have another turnover in this game, but I'm seeing Nebraska being able to overcome that. And I'm not going with that 31-28 prediction because I think that's too high of a score for how this game script would need to go for Nebraska to win. So I'm going 27-23, which I know, Greg, step on your toe. as soon as the 31-28 came out of my mouth out loud, I was thinking 27-23. You said yours earlier with whatever it's going to be. I wasn't meaning to go on your exact score, but 27-23, Nebraska pulls off the upset. Their first win over a ranked team in 22 tries, 21 straight losses against ranked teams. That skid's going to end on Saturday.
Wow, our posters are going to love you for picking the Huskers to win a football game.
And you know that I'm not just trying to be all sunshine and rainbows. Pick Minnesota to lose or to win last week, and nobody like that. But it's like that's just how I see it going. That's how I see it going now. I mean, coming into the season, I had them losing to Minnesota, beating Colorado, beating Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech, starting off 3-1. And the context of this game has changed after last week with Colorado. I mean, my thinking and analysis of this game has changed, but the end result has not for me.
Good stuff. My prediction, 30-24 Colorado. So I think the Buffaloes get a 30-24 win. Just after everything that happened after the Minnesota loss and then seeing Colorado and that offense just kind of hum along to over 500 total yards, I try not to overreact. So I don't want to think Nebraska's offense and Jeff Sims is just what it's going to be for the rest of the season, like what they showed against the Gophers. I don't think that's the case. And I think a lot of the overreaction that we heard this week is completely out of line and just like dumb and stupid, really. But
there's a thing on our board saying, would you trade Deion Sanders for Matt Rule right now after one?
Like if you had just go down, I should have taken a screenshot of just the thread names on the board, like after the Minnesota game and then during the Colorado game. It was absurd, but I digress. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. And then I want to do the same thing with Colorado. Yeah, that offense looked incredible, but I want to see some consistency first, some more games from them to really ultimately get a good grasp of them, just like I want to do with Nebraska's offense and the defense. So I just feel like we don't know as much as we should before we start making these statements that we are. But, I picked Colorado because just show me first, Nebraska, show me that you can play mistake-free football on the road in a hostile big game. But like, if you do that, then I feel comfortable predicting you to win. But until I see it, I don't feel comfortable predicting them to win the football game. I just think that, Colorado is going to be at home. I listened to Deion Sanders' press conference. He seems very, very so he says crazy things and he says all these different things, but at the end of the day, I think he's a pretty good football coach, and he's drilling it in his kids' minds in the locker room that, look, sure, we beat TCU, but right now is a new week. It's a new opponent. It's a new game. Forget everything that you just did last week. I mean, I think Deion Sanders is really kind of down to earth when he's like in football mode and he's talking about football. I really enjoyed listening to him talk about the game, because I think he's really kind of drawing it in his guys' heads that, hey, forget last week. We got to do it again, because, everybody is going to be watching us, and you don't want to misstep and lose this game to Nebraska, a rivalry game. So 30-24, Colorado gets out of their win. Before I can pick Nebraska to win a game, they need to show me that they can play mistake and error-free football on the road in a big game.
As bad as social media was, Husker Twitter and some of the comments, not all, some, a good chunk on the message board were after that game, it would be just as fun and the opposite if my score prediction comes true, because I'm going to predict that Nebraska actually goes out there and takes care of business in a one-score win, ends that long skid that Zach talked about against ranked teams. I'm picking Nebraska to win 28-24. I think that has to be about kind of the type of game that it needs to be for them to win. I don't think that they're going to be able to go full Big Ten West and win this like like 20-14 or anything like that. That's going to be really difficult to do because Colorado's skill guys, they're going to hit a big play or two, even if you have a great overall game defensively, just because it just takes one mistake with some of that skill talent that they have. But I think Nebraska goes up there and plays a much improved football game, even from what we saw last week. And I think that when you look back at last week, it is a better performance in spots than you actually remember, and that the anger that a lot of fans had will allow them to actually see, particularly on defense. And I actually think on the offensive line, I think that the offensive line played better than they're getting credit for. I think that some of those sacks, and they were bad, some of that was on miscommunication. Not all of that was on Turner Corcoran. Some of that was on Ethan Piper, not to call him out directly, but if I'm Turner Corcoran, I'm like, hey man, I'm getting called out left and right. And some of that was that guy spun inside and you actually should have taken him out. And so, yeah, I think that they played better than expected last week, or that people remember. I think they do the same thing and then some this week. I think Matt Rule and his staff iron out some of the kind of hiccups that they had kind of communication wise and getting guys going on the field. And most importantly, maybe for the offense, they won't start this game like backed up on their one, which will allow them to start off in a nice rhythm offensively and pound that rock. The run the ball guy will be very happy. Nebraska 28, Colorado 24.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on what both of you guys said, and it's just I could see it going, not to be 50-50 guy, but I see it playing out in one of those ways. It's just which one will it play out? Which version of this game are we going to get? And maybe none of it happens. Maybe this Travis Hunter, Quentin Newsom, or Travis Hunter versus the Nebraska secondary matchup that we've talked about so much winds up not happening. It winds up being one of those storylines, the classic storylines we all hype up in the media, and then it winds up being a dud. I don't foresee that happening.
Who knows if Travis Hunter is going to continue playing as many snaps as he has. I mean, that too.
I mean, like at some point, that's going to. I mean, that's just a thing.
Is it
that
sustainable?
I'm ready to see. Like,
can you do that every single game?
If Nebraska isolates and tries to run that way, like, what are you going to like? That's a whole different thing. We do a whole separate pot on that. So yeah, but that's going to, those game within the game matchups, Luke Reimer trying to get Dylan Edwards out of the backfield versus whoever the heck that was for TCU that was lost all game. Like those sorts of things that you get. Oh, hey, former Nebraska guy. He was going to come here. And so yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's fascinating. So yeah, tons of storylines in this game. Rightfully so. It's a huge game. Can't wait.
I do think just before we get out of here, so Colorado ran a lot of mesh concepts, just underneath routes, trying to rub defenders and free guys open in man coverage. Jamoy Hodge just too big to do that. Luke Reimer at 225 pounds is more suited to be following Dylan Edward type running backs out of the backfield, I think. So hopefully Luke does a lot better job than number 6 from TCU does or did.
Yeah, we got to get out of here, but I did have one more fact that I meant to throw in earlier, and then I looked it up for clarity. A little trivia time. Do you know either of you guys know how many missed tackles Nebraska had against Northwestern last year, and how many missed tackles they had against Minnesota this year in their openers? A lot and a lot less is what I would guess.
So Nebraska 14 missed tackles against Northwestern, 6 against Minnesota, which might be skewed one or two missed tackles stat wise, but 14-6. TCU 19 missed tackles last week against Colorado. So I know we talked about it before, but like Tony White said, that gang pursuit, that gang tackling, it's drilled in my mind after watching Colorado last week and after watching Nebraska not have those issues tackling and being that physical, aggressive defense. I mean, offense didn't run the ball like we anticipated all offseason, but everything we heard about this defense it was going to be fast, aggressive, physical. It wasn't going to be scared of dominant contact, as the saying goes. And they showed it. They ripped some hits pretty much all night in the trenches and on the secondary or in the second level with Malcolm Hartzog and you name it. There are a lot of big hitters. So that's going to be crucial again in this one. And like we said, me and Greg have the upset prediction. Steve has Colorado winning, but if Nebraska pulls this off, I don't think we can underestimate how much this could do
for the program, just belief, confidence, and then going into a 2-week stretch where neither of those are gimmies. We'll tease that for next week. Neither Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech are not gimmies, so that's why. But it would be just a huge momentum boost in the second biggest spotlight of the week behind Texas and Alabama. So we'll be at the field. Steve and I and our digital producer Jansen Coburn will be boots on the ground over in Boulder for a spotlight game. Big noon kickoff at 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain Time for Nebraska, Colorado. So for Steve Marik and Greg Smith, I'm Zack Carpenter, and we'll catch you guys again next time.